I thank to Amir for his introduction. Let me start by thanking a lot the organizers of this event for giving me an opportunity to share my views on the topic of peace and security. I would also like to thank all of you who have attended and are following this event. As it was mentioned in my introduction, my name is Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza, and I am joining from Kigali in Rwanda. I would have liked to be there and interact with you face to face. However, I can't. This is because although I was released by presidential grace, I cannot leave my country without the approval from the Minister of Justice from Rwanda. I must also appear once a month to the local prosecutor office to confirm that I am still in the country. I have asked 3 times the permission to leave Rwanda, but I did not receive any response from the authorities. Therefore, I can't travel to meet my family in the Netherlands that I have not seen over the past 12 years. I was not able to attend my son's wedding last February. My husband is severely sick and I cannot travel to see him. Thanks to the modern technology, I can frequently speak to my family in the same way as I am going to talk to you today. I am grateful for this opportunity to share my views from the perspective of someone who advocates for human rights, respect for the rule of law, the establishment of genuine democracy in Rwanda, as well as peace and security in the Great Lakes region. Africa has been identified with conflict, wars, and poverty. The causes of these conflicts and wars are often attributed to ethnic diversity found in most African states. In order to prevent ethnic-related conflicts on the African continent, it has been believed that some African states are better off when they are severely governed by strong men who can guarantee security in concerned countries using all means possible. But this is not true and right. The diversity of Africa's ethnicity should be celebrated and not infringed. For me, the problem is in some African states are of bad governance, lack of democracy, and the lack of respect of human rights, and not a result of tribalism. For example, the cycle of political violence in Rwanda is not due to innate hatred between Hutu and Tutsi. It is due to political and social exclusion and the violation of human rights. Sadly, the political elite has used group grievances to canvass political support to access and retain power. I believe in an inclusive development, democracy, and the respect of human rights, as these can indeed break the cycle of political violence we have seen happening on the African continent. I am convinced that there cannot be durable development without democracy and the respect of human rights. In my view, citizens who can freely express their opinion, facilitate their leaders to efficiently allocate national resources, where citizens' rights are respected and their leaders are in democratic manners, a safer environment to conduct economic activities is guaranteed. What is the problem of Rwanda? The political history of Rwanda is characterized by a cycle of violence, due to lack of good governance. Political transfer and power during the period of monarchy and the republic regime has been marked by violence. The independence of Rwanda was preceded by a revolution of 1959, which forced some Rwandans to go into exile. The first ever ruling party that led Rwanda has made no attempt to attenuate social grievances engendered by revolution. In 1973, the then president of Rwanda was overthrown through a coup d'etat. The coup d'etat led to the other Rwandans going to exile. The president that took over the power reigned for decades, winning consecutively elections with close to 100% votes. Similarly to its predecessor, the new regime did not solve the social grievances of Rwandans who fled Rwanda during the revolution of 1959 and after the coup d'etat of 1973. In spite that it was clear that governance reforms were needed all along, the ruling party was slow in putting them in practice. And when it did, it was too late. The Rwandan Patriotic Front, RPF, launched an attack on Rwanda. In 1990, the RPF was composed of mainly the descendants of Rwandans who went in exile after the aforementioned revolution of 1959. Negotiations between the then government, various political parties, and the RPF were agreed in 1993. But in 1994, the president of Rwanda was assassinated and the civil war resumed that culminated in the genocide against the Tutsi. In 1994, the RPF won the battle and took power. At the time, there was internally displaced people across Rwanda. I take the opportunity to thank the Australians' humanitarian relief to Rwandans that included a medical team and 2 contingents to Rwanda. Australian soldiers will always be remembered for saving innocents from the killing in the refugee camp in Kibeho in 1995. Although the majority of Rwandans who had fled Rwanda during the revolution of 1959 returned, the civil war and the genocide against Tutsis led to a new exodus of thousands of Rwandans into exile. The current regime implemented a consensus democracy that aimed to prevent further ethnic violence while accelerating development. Though this political system was supposedly a multi-party system, it transformed over time into a single-party system that suppresses political dissent, restricts pluralism, and caps civil liberty. The current president of Rwanda has also ruled the country for over 2 decades, winning elections with close to 100% votes. There is, however, difference in how the current regime has opted to solving the Rwanda refugees problem. Rwanda army invaded its western neighboring state, the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, in the late 1990s with the aim to fight the remaining ex-Rwandan force army that had sought refuge in DRC after the civil war and the genocide of 1994. During the process, the United Nations has reported that thousands of Rwanda refugees and Congolese nationals were killed, but also other thousands of Rwanda refugees were returned to their motherland. In effort to get Rwanda refugees to return home, the current regime has also arranged for the UN to pass a refugee cessation clause that Rwanda is safe and no Rwanda citizen should be considered as a refugee. The current government has also implemented initiatives in Rwanda and abroad to get Rwandan refugees to return in Rwanda, such as Come and See and Rwanda Day. In spite of using both soft and hard power to encourage the return of Rwandan refugees to Rwanda, there are still more than 200,000 Rwandan refugees across the world who will still do not want to return home today. There are considerable reasons Rwandan refugees will not return. Rather, Rwanda keep in leaving their country to seek refuge abroad. The devastating memories of civil war, genocide against Tutsi, and the refugees killed in the forest of Congo are still fresh in Rwanda's minds. In the absence of a comprehensive reconciliation policy in place in Rwanda, refugees are unlikely to return, but more Rwandans will leave the country. Furthermore, persistent and widespread poverty and inequalities force Rwandans to leave the country and discourage refugees from returning to their country. Despite international community having been praising the economic achievements made by all regimes that led Rwanda, 16 years after independence, Rwanda remains classified among the least developed and 25 poorest and the more vulnerable countries in the world today. Political persecution and human rights violations are also rife in Rwanda, and these deter Rwandan refugees to return home, but incite those in the country to leave. Anyone who dares or is perceived to challenge the government's policies and narratives, in some cases, is persecuted and labeled an enemy of the state, intending to destabilize Rwanda. What is the overall problem in the Africa Great Lakes region? The Democratic Republic of Congo is not solely responsible for the conflict in the eastern DRC. Internal problems in the neighboring countries have also contributed to fueling conflict in the region. The presence of foreign armed groups in the eastern DRC whose intent is to use force to overthrow the leadership of their country of origin, as well as the presence of foreign armed groups allegedly serving as proxies for countries neighboring the DRC, shows that without the engagement of its neighbors, peace will not prevail in the eastern DRC. The never-ending cycle of political violence in Rwanda is not only devastating our people, but also is causing instability in the wider Great Lakes region. Over the past 2 decades, since the current regime took over the power in Rwanda in 1994, has been in political tension with almost all its neighboring states, accusing them to host Rwandan refugees who want to topple its current leadership by force. At the same time, some of its neighbors have accused Rwanda of interfering in the political affairs and the others of undermining their territorial integrity. It is my view that without solving Rwanda's internal political problem, it will be impossible to bring about stability in that region. How can sustainable peace and security be achieved in Rwanda and in the Great Lakes region? Myself and another political figure from here in Rwanda, Maître Bernard Ntaganda, have drawn a roadmap for a promising future of Rwanda. In that roadmap, we propose for a solution to reform governance in Rwanda through a frank dialogue on internal political problem for Rwanda between the government and the political opposition, as well as Rwanda's civil society organization from within and outside Rwanda, especially made of Rwanda refugees, so that the cycle of violence that I described before is put to an end. Discussion during the proposed dialogue would focus on 4 themes considered as root and potential causes of instability in Rwanda and insecurity in the Great Lakes region. They include opening of political space, national reconciliation, rule of law, and sustainable development. We believe that Rwanda should learn to accept their history, learn from their mistakes, and build on the achievements of past regimes. We can build on what did well and learn from what we failed on. Thereafter, we can chart a way forward on how we can safeguard accomplished developments and build on them to attain even greater achievement for us, Rwandans, and the region. In this way, we would have transformed our tragic past into a better history which will inspire the younger generation of Rwandans. The solution we propose in our roadmap is in line with the Rwanda Constitution and the United Nations Strategy for Peace Consolidation, Conflict Prevention, and Conflict Resolution in the Great Lakes region of Africa, adopted in December 2020. The strategy affirms that effective and sustainable dialogue among citizens is key to fostering trust, addressing underlying grievances, and facilitating action for peace, stability, and prosperity. For more than 2 decades, governments in the Great Lakes region have prioritized the use of military operations. However, the use of military operations has been routinely questioned, particularly because they have been characterized by a surge in human rights abuses, the proliferation of armed groups, as well as persisting insecurity in the east of DRC. It is, in my opinion, that without solving Rwanda's internal political problem, it will be impossible to bring about stability in that region. Therefore, I hereby request representatives of Australian government and the leaders of United Nations Association of Australia, as well as Australians, to support or appeal to get the intra-Rwanda dialogue to be included in the UN strategy for peace, consolidation, conflict prevention, and conflict resolution in the Great Lakes region. I thank you for your attention.
Wow, thank you very much, Victoire.